Question 1. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a data breach within Prosegur's client management system and a high potential impact. Which of the following strategies best addresses this risk profile in accordance with UK regulatory frameworks and CISI guidelines? Option A. Implement enhanced data encryption for data at rest and in transit, enforce strict access controls based on the principle of least privilege, and conduct regular security awareness training for all personnel handling client data. Option B. Increase the complexity of external firewalls and intrusion detection systems, assuming that the primary threat vector is external network intrusion. Option C. Accept the identified risk without implementing additional controls, citing current budget limitations as justification. Option D. Invest in a single, advanced endpoint detection and response solution, without reviewing existing security infrastructure or employee training protocols. Correct answer is A. Implement enhanced data encryption for data at rest and in transit, enforce strict access controls based on the principle of least privilege, and conduct regular security awareness training for all personnel handling client data. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a data breach occurring within Prosegur's client management system, coupled with a high potential impact due to the sensitive nature of the client data stored. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a balanced approach to risk mitigation, considering both the probability and severity of the threat without over- or underinvesting resources. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate and cost-effective control measures that align with Prosegur's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a layered security strategy that addresses the identified risks directly. This involves implementing robust technical controls, such as advanced encryption for data at rest and in transit, and stringent access controls based on the principle of least privilege. Furthermore, it mandates regular security awareness training for all personnel who handle client data, reinforcing the human element of cybersecurity. This comprehensive strategy aligns with the principles of data protection and security mandated by relevant UK regulations, such as the Data Protection Act 2018 and the UK GDPR, which require organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure a level of security appropriate to the risk. It also reflects best practice guidance from CISI, emphasizing proactive risk management and the protection of client information. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing firewall complexity without addressing internal access controls or employee training would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge that a significant portion of data breaches originate from internal vulnerabilities or compromised credentials, not just external network threats. Such an approach would represent a regulatory failure by not implementing appropriate organizational measures as required by the UK GDPR, potentially leading to inadequate protection of personal data. Another incorrect approach that involves accepting the risk without implementing any new controls, citing budget constraints, would also be professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for the potential impact on clients and the organization, and a failure to meet the due diligence expected under data protection laws. It constitutes an ethical failure to protect client data and a regulatory failure to implement appropriate security measures, potentially exposing Prosegur to significant fines and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that involves implementing a single, expensive, but ultimately ineffective security solution without a holistic review of existing controls and potential vulnerabilities would be professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and a failure to conduct a thorough risk assessment, leading to wasted resources and continued exposure to the identified risks. It would be a failure to adhere to the principle of proportionality in risk management, a key tenet of both regulatory compliance and ethical business practice. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic risk assessment, identifying threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood, and impact. This should be followed by a cost-benefit analysis of potential mitigation strategies, considering both financial and operational implications. The chosen controls must be proportionate to the identified risks and aligned with regulatory requirements and the organization's risk appetite. Regular review and testing of implemented controls are crucial to ensure their ongoing effectiveness. Question 2. Consider a scenario where a candidate, after completing a Prosegur hiring assessment test designed to evaluate their problem-solving abilities and attention to detail, expresses significant disappointment and frustration, stating they felt the questions were unfair and did not accurately reflect their capabilities. As the assessor, you are tasked with providing feedback. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the professional and regulatory expectations for this assessment? Option A. Focus the feedback on the candidate's apparent emotional distress, suggesting that their reaction indicates a lack of resilience, which is a key trait the assessment aims to identify, and therefore their performance is unsatisfactory. Option B. Agree with the candidate's assertion that the test was unfair and suggest that the results should be disregarded, offering to provide a general positive reference based on your subjective impression of their demeanor during the assessment. Option C. Provide feedback that directly references specific examples from the assessment where the candidate demonstrated strengths in problem solving and attention to detail, as well as areas where performance could be improved, all grounded in the objective scoring criteria of the test. Option D. Reassure the candidate that their feelings are valid and suggest that the test might not be a perfect measure of their true potential, offering to overlook some of the lower scores to improve their overall impression. The correct answer is C. Provide feedback that directly references specific examples from the assessment where the candidate demonstrated strengths in problem solving and attention to detail, as well as areas where performance could be improved, all grounded in the objective scoring criteria of the test. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate desire for a specific outcome and the professional's duty to uphold regulatory compliance and ethical standards. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing client satisfaction with the imperative to act with integrity, and within the bounds of the Prosegur hiring assessment test's specified regulatory framework. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Prosegur hiring assessment test's guidelines, which are designed to ensure fair and objective assessment processes. This involves a thorough understanding and application of the assessment's objectives and scoring criteria, ensuring that any feedback provided is constructive, accurate, and directly related to the candidate's performance as measured by the test. This upholds the integrity of the assessment process and maintains trust in Prosegur's hiring procedures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the candidate's perceived emotional state without reference to the assessment criteria would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the objective nature of the assessment and could lead to biased feedback, undermining the validity of the test results. It also risks misinterpreting performance, potentially offering encouragement based on irrelevant factors rather than actual skill demonstration. Another incorrect approach that involves fabricating or exaggerating positive aspects of the candidate's performance to appease them would be a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This constitutes dishonesty and misrepresentation, directly contravening the principles of integrity and fairness expected in any professional assessment. Such actions would not only damage the candidate's development, but also compromise Prosegur's reputation and the credibility of its hiring process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, clearly identify the objectives of the assessment and the relevant Prosegur guidelines. Second, objectively evaluate the candidate's performance against these established criteria. Third, formulate feedback that is truthful, constructive, and directly addresses the assessment outcomes. Finally, if a candidate expresses dissatisfaction or confusion, address their concerns by referring back to the objective assessment results and the established evaluation framework, rather than deviating from professional standards or the assessment's purpose. Question 3. The investigation demonstrates that Prosegur's current incident reporting process is experiencing delays and occasional inaccuracies, impacting both operational response times and regulatory compliance. To address this, which of the following optimization strategies would best align with regulatory expectations and enhance overall process efficiency? Option A. Implementing a phased approach to process review, starting with frontline staff feedback, followed by supervisory input, and culminating in a compliance audit to identify specific areas for procedural refinement and technology integration. Option B. Immediately deploying a new, advanced reporting software system across all departments, assuming it will inherently streamline the process and reduce reporting errors. Option C. conducting a superficial review of the reporting template and making minor cosmetic changes to improve its appearance. Option D. Prioritizing the reduction of report filing time by encouraging staff to submit preliminary reports without full verification during active incidents. Correct answer is A. Implementing a phased approach to process review, starting with frontline staff feedback, followed by supervisory input, and culminating in a compliance audit to identify specific areas for procedural refinement and technology integration. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a situation where a security company, Prosegur, is reviewing its internal processes for managing incident response and reporting. The challenge lies in balancing the need for swift and effective action during an incident with the regulatory requirements for accurate and timely reporting, all while optimizing resource allocation. Professionals must navigate potential conflicts between immediate operational demands and the meticulous documentation and compliance obligations. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, multi-stage review that incorporates feedback from all relevant stakeholders, including frontline staff, supervisors, and compliance officers. This aligns with best practices in process optimization, which advocate for a holistic understanding of workflows and the identification of bottlenecks or inefficiencies. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing security operations and data handling, often mandate clear reporting lines, standardized procedures, and regular audits. Optimizing the incident response process to meet these requirements ensures not only compliance, but also enhances operational effectiveness and accountability. This approach fosters continuous improvement by embedding learning from incidents back into the process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the time taken to file reports without addressing the underlying causes of delays or potential inaccuracies would be professionally unsound. This could lead to superficial fixes that mask deeper systemic issues, potentially resulting in non-compliance with reporting standards and an increased risk of errors. Another incorrect approach might involve implementing new technology without adequate training or integration into existing workflows, leading to user resistance and further inefficiencies. This disregards the human element and the importance of change management in process optimization. A third incorrect approach could be to bypass established reporting protocols in favor of expediency during an incident, which would directly violate regulatory requirements for documentation and potentially compromise the integrity of the investigation and subsequent actions. This demonstrates a failure to understand the critical link between operational speed and regulatory adherence. Professionals should approach process optimization by first thoroughly mapping the existing process, identifying key performance indicators, and gathering qualitative and quantitative data. This should be followed by a root cause analysis of any identified issues. Solutions should then be developed collaboratively, considering both operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. Pilot testing and phased implementation, coupled with ongoing monitoring and feedback loops, are crucial for successful and sustainable process improvement. Question 4. Upon reviewing a series of large, complex international transactions for a long-standing and high-profile client, a compliance officer notices several unusual patterns that deviate significantly from the client's typical financial behavior and lack clear economic or lawful purpose. The client has provided explanations that, while not entirely implausible, still raise concerns about the potential for illicit activity. The firm's internal risk assessment flags these transactions as potentially high risk. What is the most appropriate course of action for the compliance officer to take, strictly adhering to UK financial regulatory frameworks and guidance? Option A. Proceed with processing the transactions as requested by the client, assuming the client's explanations are sufficient to avoid disrupting the business relationship and potential loss of revenue. Option B. Inform the client directly that their transactions are under suspicion and request more detailed documentation and justification for each transaction before proceeding. Option C. Advise the client that due to the unusual nature of the transactions, the firm will be unable to process them and will be terminating the business relationship. Option D. Immediately escalate the matter internally to the firm's Money Laundering Reporting Officer, MLRO, for further investigation and potential reporting to the National Crime Agency, while continuing to monitor the client's activities within established protocols. The correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the matter internally to the firm's Money Laundering Reporting Officer, MLRO, for further investigation and potential reporting to the National Crime Agency, while continuing to monitor the client's activities within established protocols. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate financial interests and the long-term regulatory obligations of a financial services firm. The firm must balance its duty to its client with its responsibility to uphold market integrity and comply with anti-money laundering (AML) regulations. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and responding appropriately to potentially suspicious activity without prejudicing the client unnecessarily or violating confidentiality rules prematurely. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. By escalating the matter internally for further investigation and reporting to the relevant authorities if warranted, the firm demonstrates its commitment to AML regulations, which are designed to prevent financial crime. This proactive stance protects the firm from regulatory penalties and reputational damage, while also contributing to the broader objective of maintaining a secure financial system. It adheres to the principle of Know Your Customer (KIC) and the obligation to report suspicious transactions. An incorrect approach that involves immediately freezing the client's assets without sufficient grounds or further investigation would be a regulatory and ethical failure. This action could be seen as a breach of fiduciary duty to the client, potentially causing undue harm and financial loss. It also risks violating data protection and privacy regulations if customer information is mishandled. Furthermore, acting unilaterally without following established internal procedures for suspicious activity reporting could lead to noncompliance with AML frameworks, such as the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002 in the UK, which mandates specific reporting channels. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the transaction due to the client's importance or the potential loss of business, represents a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This would be a direct contravention of AML obligations, exposing the firm to significant fines, sanctions, and reputational damage. It undermines the integrity of the financial system and demonstrates a disregard for legal and ethical responsibilities. Such inaction could also lead to complicity in financial crime. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the potential red flags or indicators of suspicious activity. 2. Consult internal policies and procedures for handling such situations. 3. Gather additional information discreetly if possible and appropriate. 4. Escalate the matter to the designated compliance officer or AML team for expert review. 5. Follow the firm's established protocols for reporting to the relevant authorities, e.g., the National Crime Agency in the UK, if the suspicion is substantiated. 6. Maintain accurate records of all actions taken and decisions made. 7. Ensure client confidentiality is maintained throughout the process, only disclosing information as legally required. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential vulnerability in a newly deployed surveillance system that could allow unauthorized access to live camera feeds. The system is critical for ongoing operations at a high-security client site. The immediate operational requirement is to maintain continuous surveillance. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Instruct the technical team to immediately develop and deploy a custom patch without formal risk assessment or management approval to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. Option B. Proceed with normal operations, assuming the vulnerability is minor and unlikely to be exploited, and address it during the next scheduled system maintenance. Option C. Immediately implement a temporary, documented workaround that restricts access to the affected feeds while a full investigation and permanent fix are developed, ensuring all actions are logged and reported to management. Option D. Disable the entire surveillance system until a permanent fix can be deployed to avoid any possibility of unauthorized access, even if it means disrupting ongoing operations. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement a temporary, documented workaround that restricts access to the affected feeds while a full investigation and permanent fix are developed, ensuring all actions are logged and reported to management. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in security operations, balancing immediate operational needs with long-term risk mitigation and compliance. The professional challenge lies in making a decision that is not only effective in the short term, but also adheres to established protocols and regulatory expectations, particularly concerning the handling of sensitive information and the integrity of security systems. A hasty or reactive decision can lead to significant breaches of policy, regulatory noncompliance, and reputational damage. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, evidence-based decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established procedures and regulatory frameworks. This involves a thorough risk assessment, consultation with relevant stakeholders, and a decision that is documented and justifiable. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring accountability, transparency, and a commitment to maintaining the highest standards of security and data protection, as mandated by Prosegur's internal policies and any applicable regulatory guidelines for the security industry. The focus is on proactive risk management rather than reactive problem solving. An incorrect approach that bypasses established protocols, such as immediately implementing a workaround without proper authorization or risk assessment, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could violate data privacy regulations if sensitive information is mishandled, breach internal security policies designed to prevent unauthorized system modifications, and undermine the integrity of the security infrastructure. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the issue due to perceived minor impact, demonstrates a failure in due diligence and a disregard for potential cascading risks, which is contrary to the proactive risk management expected in the security sector. Relying solely on anecdotal evidence or personal judgment without a systematic evaluation also fails to meet professional standards and regulatory expectations for objective decision-making. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Identifying the problem and its immediate impact. 2. Gathering all relevant information, including system logs, incident reports, and policy documents. 3. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment, considering potential consequences and likelihood. 4. Consulting with relevant departments or supervisors as per established escalation procedures. 5. Evaluating potential solutions against established policies, regulations, and best practices. 6. Selecting the most appropriate solution, documenting the decision-making process and the rationale. 7. Implementing the chosen solution and monitoring its effectiveness. Question 6. Examination of the data shows an unusual spike in access requests to a specific customer database segment, occurring outside of normal operational hours and without a corresponding increase in legitimate user activity. This pattern could indicate a potential unauthorized access attempt or a system misconfiguration. Option A. Proceed with a broad, unrestricted access to all customer data within the affected segment to identify the source of the unusual activity, assuming the urgency of the situation outweighs the need for immediate procedural adherence. Option B. Immediately initiate a full audit of the affected database segment, involving the designated data protection officer and IT security team to investigate the anomaly in a controlled and documented manner, while temporarily restricting access to the segment pending the outcome of the investigation. Option C. Attempt to resolve the anomaly by making ad hoc changes to the database access controls based on initial assumptions, without formal documentation or escalation to relevant compliance or security personnel. Option D. Log the anomaly for future review during the next scheduled system maintenance cycle, as the immediate impact on operations appears minimal and further investigation might disrupt ongoing business processes. Correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a full audit of the affected database segment, involving the designated data protection officer and IT security team to investigate the anomaly in a controlled and documented manner, while temporarily restricting access to the segment pending the outcome of the investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining operational efficiency and adhering to stringent data protection regulations. The need to quickly identify and address a potential security vulnerability clashes with the requirement to handle sensitive customer data with the utmost care and confidentiality. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands, ensuring that the investigation does not inadvertently lead to further data breaches or non-compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, controlled, and compliant method for investigating the anomaly. By isolating the affected systems and engaging the designated data protection officer, the professional demonstrates adherence to established protocols for handling potential data breaches. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that access to sensitive information is restricted to those with a legitimate need and the necessary authorization. Furthermore, it proactively involves the relevant compliance function, which is crucial for navigating the complex legal and ethical landscape surrounding data security. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, broad access to all customer data without proper authorization or oversight would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to unauthorized disclosure of personal information, violating data protection laws and eroding customer trust. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the anomaly due to perceived low risk or time constraints, would be a failure to uphold the duty of care and a direct contravention of proactive security obligations. This could result in a more severe breach later, with greater legal and reputational consequences. A third incorrect approach, such as attempting to resolve the issue through informal channels without documentation or escalation, bypasses critical oversight mechanisms and prevents proper accountability, potentially leading to a recurrence of the problem or a failure to meet reporting requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's data protection policies and incident response plans. When an anomaly is detected, the first step should always be to assess the potential impact and scope, followed by immediate escalation to the appropriate internal stakeholders, such as the IT security team and the data protection officer. Documentation of all actions taken, communications, and findings is paramount. Professionals should always err on the side of caution when dealing with potential data security issues, prioritizing compliance and ethical conduct over expediency. Question 7. Performance analysis shows a consistent decline in response times for security patrols in a specific sector over the past quarter. Management is concerned about potential breaches in service-level agreements and client dissatisfaction. What is the most appropriate initial step to address this performance trend? Option A. Reallocate patrol resources from other sectors to compensate for the slower response times in the underperforming area. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of patrol routes, scheduling, and communication protocols, involving direct feedback from patrol officers to identify operational bottlenecks or challenges. Option C. Immediately implement a new, more sophisticated tracking system for all patrol officers to increase accountability and monitor their movements more closely. Option D. Issue formal warnings to all patrol officers in the affected sector for failing to meet performance standards. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive review of patrol routes, scheduling, and communication protocols, involving direct feedback from patrol officers to identify operational bottlenecks or challenges. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with the imperative to maintain the integrity of security procedures, as mandated by Prosegur's internal policies and potentially broader regulatory frameworks governing private security operations. The core tension lies in addressing a performance shortfall without compromising the fundamental principles of security and client trust. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the performance dip and implement solutions that are both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven investigation into the performance decline. This involves engaging with the team to understand the practical challenges they face, which could range from inadequate training, equipment issues, or unclear operational directives. By seeking to understand the why behind the performance metrics, management demonstrates a commitment to supporting its staff and addressing systemic issues. This aligns with ethical principles of fairness and due process, ensuring that any corrective actions are proportionate and well-founded. Furthermore, it reflects a proactive approach to risk management, identifying and mitigating potential vulnerabilities before they escalate. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate disciplinary action without investigation fails to address the underlying causes of the performance issue. This could lead to a demotivated workforce, increased staff turnover, and a recurrence of the problem, all of which are detrimental to operational effectiveness and client satisfaction. Such an approach may also violate principles of natural justice and could be contrary to employment law or company policy regarding fair disciplinary procedures. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing new, untested technology without proper evaluation, or training risks introducing new operational failures. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and could lead to further performance degradation, increased costs, and potential security breaches if the technology is not robust or if staff are not adequately equipped to use it. This approach neglects the human element of security operations and the importance of a well-trained and supported workforce. A third incorrect approach that involves simply increasing surveillance of the team without addressing potential systemic issues is unlikely to be effective in the long term. While surveillance can be a tool, it does not inherently solve problems related to training, morale, or operational clarity. It can also foster an environment of distrust and anxiety, negatively impacting performance and ethical conduct. This approach may also raise privacy concerns and could be perceived as a punitive measure rather than a supportive one. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured problem-solving methodology. First, clearly define the performance issue using objective data. Second, conduct a thorough root cause analysis, which includes gathering input from the affected team members. Third, develop a range of potential solutions, evaluating each for its feasibility, effectiveness, and compliance with relevant regulations and ethical standards. Fourth, implement the chosen solution with clear communication and adequate support for the team. Finally, monitor the impact of the implemented solution and be prepared to make adjustments as necessary. This iterative process ensures that interventions are targeted, effective, and uphold the highest professional standards. Question 8. Strategic planning requires Prosegur to evaluate potential cost-saving measures for its security operations. Which of the following approaches best ensures that such measures do not compromise service quality, client trust, or regulatory compliance? Option A. Prioritize cost-saving measures that are easily quantifiable and visible, even if their long-term operational impact is uncertain. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify all potential consequences of proposed cost-saving measures on operations, clients, personnel, and regulatory adherence. Option C. Focus exclusively on reducing personnel costs, as this typically represents the largest expenditure in security services. Option D. Implement the most aggressive cost-saving measures immediately to demonstrate swift action and financial prudence to stakeholders. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify all potential consequences of proposed cost-saving measures on operations, clients, personnel, and regulatory adherence. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Prosegur to balance the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term implications of its security services. A hasty decision without proper impact assessment could lead to a decline in service quality, reputational damage, and potential breaches of contractual obligations or regulatory standards, all of which could have significant financial and legal repercussions. The pressure to cut costs is a common business challenge, but it must be managed within the bounds of responsible operational and strategic decision-making. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that all potential consequences of a decision are considered before implementation. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to maintaining service standards as required by contracts and potentially by industry-specific regulations governing private security services. It allows Prosegur to identify areas where cost savings can be achieved without compromising safety, security, or client trust, and to proactively address any negative impacts. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing cost-saving measures without a thorough impact assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It suggests a disregard for the potential consequences on service delivery, client satisfaction, and employee welfare. This approach could lead to breaches of service-level agreements, SLAs, with clients, potentially resulting in contractual penalties and legal disputes. Ethically, it can undermine the trust clients place in Prosegur to provide reliable security, and it may negatively affect the morale and effectiveness of the security personnel. Focusing solely on immediate cost reduction without considering the long-term operational effects is also problematic. This can lead to a short-sighted approach that prioritizes immediate financial gains over sustainable operational excellence. Regulatory bodies often expect organizations to maintain robust operational frameworks, and decisions that demonstrably weaken these frameworks, even for cost reasons, can attract scrutiny. Ethically, it can lead to a situation where the quality of security provided is diminished, potentially increasing risks for clients and the public. Prioritizing the perception of cost savings over actual service quality is another failure. This approach suggests a superficial understanding of the business and its responsibilities. It can lead to decisions that appear to save money on paper, but result in increased risks, client dissatisfaction, and ultimately, greater costs in the long run through lost business or remediation efforts. This can also be seen as a failure to act in the best interests of stakeholders, including clients and employees, and may contravene ethical codes that emphasize integrity and responsible business conduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a decision should adopt a structured approach. First, clearly define the objective, e.g., cost reduction. Second, identify all potential stakeholders and the impact on each. Third, gather data and analyze the potential consequences of various options, including the status quo. Fourth, evaluate these consequences against regulatory requirements, ethical principles, and strategic objectives. Fifth, develop mitigation strategies for identified risks. Finally, communicate the decision and its rationale transparently to relevant parties. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards. Question 9. Analysis of the appropriate response when a security incident potentially involves unauthorized access to customer personal data, requiring immediate investigation, but also strict adherence to data protection protocols. Option A. Inform the affected customers directly about the potential breach before any internal investigation is complete to ensure transparency. Option B. Immediately access all relevant customer data logs and records to identify the source and scope of the potential breach, documenting all actions taken. Option C. Contact the designated data protection officer and follow established incident response procedures for handling potential data breaches, ensuring all access is authorized and logged. Option D. Halt all investigation until a formal data protection impact assessment can be completed, even if it delays critical security response. The correct answer is B. Immediately access all relevant customer data logs and records to identify the source and scope of the potential breach, documenting all actions taken. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the strict adherence to data privacy regulations and internal company policies. Urgency of a potential security breach necessitates swift action, but the sensitive nature of customer data demands a cautious and compliant approach. The core of the challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of access and disclosure without compromising either security or privacy. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, authorized, and documented process for accessing and handling sensitive information. This aligns with the principles of data protection, such as data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance. By involving the designated data protection officer and adhering to established protocols, the individual demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and legal obligations, ensuring that any investigation is conducted responsibly and transparently, thereby mitigating the risk of regulatory penalties and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that involves direct, unauthorized access to customer data without proper oversight or documentation would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses established security and privacy controls, potentially leading to a breach of confidentiality, unauthorized processing of personal data, and violation of data protection laws. Such an action could result in severe penalties, including fines and legal action, and would undermine the trust placed in the organization by its customers. Another incorrect approach, such as delaying action due to uncertainty about procedures, could also be problematic, as it might allow a security threat to escalate, potentially causing greater harm. However, the primary ethical and regulatory failure lies in the unauthorized access and handling of data. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the problem and the potential risks involved. This should be followed by consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. If there is any ambiguity or if the situation involves sensitive data, the next step is to escalate to the appropriate authority or designated officer, such as a data protection officer or legal counsel. Documentation of all steps taken, decisions made, and communications is crucial throughout the process to ensure accountability and compliance. Question 10. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive evaluation of operational processes to identify opportunities for enhancement. When faced with pressure to reduce operational costs within a security services firm, what is the most prudent and compliant approach to process optimization? Option A. Focus solely on reducing staffing levels in non-client-facing roles, believing this will have minimal impact on service delivery and compliance. Option B. Immediately implement across-the-board budget cuts to all operational departments, assuming that financial constraints will naturally drive efficiency. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of existing workflows, gather data on performance metrics, consult with operational staff, and assess the impact of any proposed changes on service quality and regulatory compliance before implementing modifications. Option D. Prioritize the adoption of the latest technological solutions advertised as efficiency boosters, without a detailed analysis of their suitability for current operational needs. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of existing workflows, gather data on performance metrics, consult with operational staff, and assess the impact of any proposed changes on service quality and regulatory compliance before implementing modifications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization within a security services context like Prosegur. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term imperative of maintaining service quality and regulatory compliance. Overly aggressive cost-cutting can lead to understaffing, inadequate training, or the use of substandard equipment, all of which directly impact operational effectiveness and client trust. Furthermore, any process changes must align with the stringent regulatory framework governing private security operations in the UK, ensuring adherence to standards set by bodies like the Security Industry Authority, JA, and relevant health and safety legislation. Failure to consider these factors can result in significant reputational damage, financial penalties, and loss of operational licenses. Correct approach analysis. The most effective approach involves a holistic review of current processes, identifying inefficiencies and areas for improvement through data analysis and stakeholder consultation, while rigorously assessing the impact on service delivery and regulatory adherence. This aligns with best practices in process optimization, which emphasize a systematic, evidence-based methodology. Specifically, it reflects the principles of continuous improvement Kaizen and lean management, aiming to eliminate waste and enhance value. From a regulatory perspective, this approach ensures that any proposed changes are vetted against the SIA's licensing objectives and the requirements of the Private Security Industry Act 2001, which mandate competent and responsible service provision. It also implicitly addresses health and safety regulations by ensuring that changes do not compromise the well-being of staff or the public. This method prioritizes informed decision-making, minimizing risks and maximizing the likelihood of sustainable improvements. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing cost-cutting measures solely based on immediate financial targets without a thorough process review is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks compromising the quality of service, potentially leading to breaches of contractual obligations with clients, and contravening the SIA's requirements for effective security provision. It also fails to consider the impact on staff morale and retention, which can indirectly affect operational security. Focusing on technological solutions without understanding the underlying operational workflow and human factors is another flawed strategy. While technology can be a powerful tool for optimization, its implementation must be tailored to the specific needs and context of the security operations. A misapplied technology can create new inefficiencies or even introduce security vulnerabilities, potentially violating data protection regulations or operational security standards. Making changes based on anecdotal evidence or the preferences of a single department without broader consultation or data validation is professionally unsound. This can lead to unintended consequences, resistance from other operational units, and a failure to achieve genuine process improvements. It also bypasses the due diligence required to ensure compliance with the diverse regulatory landscape that governs security operations, which often involves multiple stakeholders and operational areas. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing process optimization challenges should adopt a structured, data-driven, and risk-aware decision-making framework. This involves 1. defining clear objectives that encompass efficiency, quality, and compliance. 2. Conducting a comprehensive analysis of existing processes, utilizing both quantitative data and qualitative feedback from operational staff and management. 3. Identifying potential solutions and rigorously evaluating their impact on service delivery, regulatory adherence, and financial outcomes. 4. Prioritizing solutions that offer the greatest net benefit, considering both short-term gains and long-term sustainability. 5. Implementing changes in a phased manner, with robust monitoring and evaluation mechanisms in place. 6. Ensuring continuous engagement with all relevant stakeholders throughout the process. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both business objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 11. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for expedited delivery of a high-value consignment due to a client's urgent operational needs. The standard procedure requires a dual-person verification of the consignment's contents against the manifest at the point of handover. However, the designated second verifier is unexpectedly delayed. The client is pressing for immediate departure to meet a critical deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Delay the departure until the designated second verifier arrives and completes the standard dual-person verification process as per established protocols. Option B. Proceed with the handover and departure, relying solely on the initial verifier's confirmation and the client's assurance that the contents are correct. Option C. Authorize the client's representative, who is present and familiar with the consignment, to act as the second verifier to expedite the process. Option D. Immediately depart with the consignment, initiating the verification process en route to the destination. The correct answer is A. Delay the departure until the designated second verifier arrives and completes the standard dual-person verification process as per established protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between operational efficiency and the imperative to maintain robust security protocols. The need to expedite a delivery, especially one involving sensitive materials, can create pressure to bypass or shorten standard security checks. However, Prosegur's operations are governed by strict regulatory frameworks designed to prevent loss, theft, and unauthorized access. Adhering to these regulations is not merely a procedural requirement, but a fundamental ethical obligation to clients and the public. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established security protocols, even under time pressure. This reflects best professional practice by demonstrating a commitment to the integrity of the security chain, which is paramount in the security services industry. It aligns with regulatory requirements that mandate thorough vetting and procedural compliance at every stage of asset handling. By refusing to compromise on security, the professional upholds the trust placed in Prosegur and mitigates potential risks, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and client assets. An incorrect approach that involves expediting the process by skipping a verification step would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such an action directly contravenes security procedures designed to prevent unauthorized diversions or losses. It could lead to breaches of contract with clients, regulatory penalties, and severe reputational damage. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the responsibility to protect client property and a failure to act with due diligence. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to delegate the verification to an unqualified individual, also fails to meet regulatory standards for personnel competency and oversight, creating further vulnerabilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core objective, secure delivery, and then systematically evaluates potential actions against established protocols and regulatory mandates. When faced with time constraints, the process should involve seeking authorized deviations or alternative solutions that do not compromise security, rather than simply bypassing established checks. This involves clear communication with supervisors and clients about potential delays and the reasons for them, ensuring transparency and managing expectations while upholding professional standards. Question 12. Research into the procedures for handling potentially suspicious client transactions within a UK-based financial services firm. What is the most appropriate initial course of action when an employee observes activity that deviates significantly from a client's known profile and financial behavior, raising concerns about potential money laundering? Option A. Immediately report the suspicion to the firm's Money Laundering Reporting Officer, MLRO, and await further instructions. Option B. Directly contact the client to inquire about the unusual nature of the transaction to clarify the situation. Option C. Conduct an independent investigation into the client's background and the source of funds without informing the firm's compliance department. Option D. Disregard the activity, as it is not the employee's direct responsibility to police client transactions. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the suspicion to the firm's Money Laundering Reporting Officer, MLRO, and await further instructions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining client confidentiality and the obligation to report suspicious activities that could indicate financial crime. The Prosegur hiring assessment test likely assesses an individual's understanding of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct within the security and financial services sectors. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing duties, ensuring that actions taken are both legally compliant and ethically sound, thereby protecting the firm and its clients from reputational and financial damage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the relevant regulatory framework, which in this context would be UK regulations and CISI guidelines, as Prosegur operates within this jurisdiction. Specifically, it involves a proactive and documented process of internal reporting and escalation. This aligns with the principles of anti-money laundering, AML, and counter-terrorist financing, CTF regulations, which mandate that suspicious activity reports, SAR, be made to the appropriate authorities, e.g., the National Crime Agency in the UK, when there is a suspicion of criminal activity. By reporting internally first, the individual ensures that the firm can conduct its own assessment, gather further information if necessary, and make a properly informed decision about whether a formal SAR is required, thereby avoiding unnecessary or premature reporting that could alert potential criminals. This internal process is crucial for effective risk management and compliance. An incorrect approach that involves ignoring the suspicious activity or failing to report it internally or externally represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would breach the firm's compliance obligations under UK law and CISI rules, which require vigilance against financial crime. Such an action could lead to the firm being complicit in money laundering or terrorist financing, resulting in severe penalties, including fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately reporting the suspicion to external authorities without internal consultation or investigation, could be premature and potentially unfounded, leading to unnecessary investigations, reputational harm to the client, and a waste of law enforcement resources. It also bypasses the firm's internal control mechanisms designed to manage such situations effectively and confidentially. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear step-by-step approach. First, recognize and document the suspicious activity. Second, consult the firm's internal policies and procedures regarding suspicious activity reporting. Third, report the suspicion to the designated compliance officer, or MLRO, Money Laundering Reporting Officer, within the firm. Fourth, cooperate fully with the internal investigation and follow the guidance provided by the compliance department. Fifth, if the firm determines a SAR is necessary, ensure it is filed promptly and accurately with the relevant regulatory body. This structured approach ensures that all regulatory obligations are met, ethical standards are upheld, and the firm's interests are protected. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that Prosegur's internal audit team is tasked with reviewing operational performance metrics for a key client contract. This review involves examining data related to access control logs, incident reports, and personnel deployment schedules. To ensure efficiency and maintain client confidentiality, what is the most appropriate best practice approach for the audit team to follow when accessing and handling this sensitive operational data during their review? Option A. Relying on informal discussions with operational staff to gather insights into performance, without directly accessing or reviewing the underlying data logs or reports. Option B. Accessing the data through a secure, dedicated audit portal that automatically logs all access, and utilizing anonymized or pseudonymized data sets where possible, with a clear protocol for escalating any identified sensitive information requiring direct client attention. Option C. Requesting raw data files directly from the client's operational manager and reviewing them on personal devices, with a verbal agreement to maintain confidentiality. Option D. conducting a physical review of printed reports in a non-secure office environment, with a plan to shred all documents immediately after the review is complete. The correct answer is B. Accessing the data through a secure, dedicated audit portal that automatically logs all access, and utilizing anonymized or pseudonymized data sets where possible, with a clear protocol for escalating any identified sensitive information requiring direct client attention. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient operational procedures with the imperative to maintain the highest standards of security and compliance, as mandated by Prosegur's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks governing private security operations. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and implementing best practices for the handling of sensitive client information during routine operational reviews, ensuring that data integrity and confidentiality are preserved without hindering necessary oversight. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, documented, and secure method for reviewing operational data. This aligns with the principles of data protection and operational integrity, which are fundamental in the security industry. By ensuring that data is anonymized or pseudonymized where appropriate, and that access is strictly controlled and logged, this method upholds client trust and adheres to any applicable data privacy regulations that Prosegur must comply with. This proactive stance on data security and privacy is a hallmark of a responsible and compliant security provider. An incorrect approach that involves casual, unrecorded access to client data during operational reviews poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. It could lead to breaches of confidentiality, unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information, and potential noncompliance with data protection laws. Such an approach undermines client trust and exposes Prosegur to reputational damage and legal penalties. Another incorrect approach, which involves discarding operational data immediately after a cursory review without proper archiving or secure disposal, fails to meet potential audit requirements or the need for historical analysis. This can also be seen as a failure in due diligence and record keeping, which are often stipulated in operational standards and regulatory guidelines. A third incorrect approach, relying solely on verbal summaries of findings without any written documentation, is inherently risky. It lacks accountability, makes it difficult to track issues, and can lead to misinterpretations or omissions, thereby failing to establish a clear audit trail and potentially violating internal control procedures. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory and internal policy requirements for data handling and operational reviews. This involves identifying the sensitivity of the data, the purpose of the review, and the necessary security protocols. The next step is to evaluate potential approaches against these requirements, prioritizing methods that ensure data security, confidentiality, accuracy, and auditability. When in doubt, seeking clarification from compliance officers or legal counsel is a crucial part of due diligence. Continuous training on data protection and operational best practices is also essential for maintaining a high standard of professional conduct. Question 14. The control framework reveals a client has requested an unusual disbursement of funds that deviates from standard operating procedures and lacks the usual supporting documentation. The operational manager is under pressure to expedite the client's request to maintain a positive client relationship. Which of the following decision-making approaches best aligns with Prosegur's commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct? Option A. Immediately process the disbursement to satisfy the client, assuming the client's intent is legitimate and addressing any procedural gaps later. Option B. Escalate the request to the compliance department and await their formal guidance and approval before taking any action, even if it delays the client's request. Option C. Inform the client that the request cannot be processed due to procedural noncompliance and offer no alternative solutions. Option D. Attempt to find an informal workaround that fulfills the client's request without strictly adhering to the documented procedure to avoid bureaucratic delays. The correct answer is A. Immediately process the disbursement to satisfy the client, assuming the client's intent is legitimate and addressing any procedural gaps later. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance immediate operational pressures with the long-term integrity of Prosegur's control framework. The core conflict lies between fulfilling a client's request, which could have financial implications, and adhering to established procedures designed to prevent fraud and maintain compliance. The need for careful judgment stems from the potential for a seemingly minor deviation to have significant downstream consequences, impacting client trust, regulatory standing, and the company's reputation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the established control framework and regulatory guidelines. This aligns with the principle of tone at the top and demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and robust internal controls, which are fundamental to maintaining client confidence and regulatory compliance within the security industry. Specifically, it upholds the spirit of regulations that mandate clear accountability, proper authorization for financial transactions, and the prevention of unauthorized access or manipulation of client funds or assets. This approach ensures that decisions are made through a documented and approved process, minimizing the risk of error or misconduct. An incorrect approach that involves directly fulfilling the client's request without proper authorization or documentation would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could be seen as a breach of internal control policies, potentially violating regulations related to financial transparency, anti-money laundering, or client asset protection, depending on the specific nature of the request and the jurisdiction's financial regulations. Bypasses the checks and balances designed to prevent fraud and errors, creating a vulnerability. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to find a workaround that circumvents established procedures without explicit approval, also fails ethically and regulatorily. This demonstrates a lack of respect for the control framework and could lead to unintended consequences or the appearance of impropriety, undermining trust and potentially violating compliance mandates. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the established policies and procedures relevant to the situation. This involves identifying the specific control framework in place, the relevant regulatory requirements, and the ethical considerations. The next step is to assess the request against these established parameters. If the request appears to deviate or conflict, the professional should seek clarification and guidance from their supervisor or the relevant compliance department. The decision should then be made based on a thorough understanding of the potential risks and consequences, always prioritizing adherence to the control framework and regulatory obligations. This structured approach ensures that decisions are not made impulsively, but are grounded in sound judgment and a commitment to integrity. Question 15. Which approach would be most appropriate for a security officer who is approached by a known colleague requesting immediate access to a restricted equipment room to resolve a critical operational issue, but the colleague does not have their access card readily available? Option A. Deny access until the colleague retrieves their access card, regardless of the urgency of the operational issue. Option B. Create a temporary, undocumented override code for the colleague to use. Option C. Allow the colleague to enter the room without any verification, assuming they are a trusted individual. Option D. Grant temporary access after verifying the colleague's identity and the legitimacy of the request through a supervisor via a secure communication channel and documenting the temporary access. The correct answer is D. Grant temporary access after verifying the colleague's identity and the legitimacy of the request through a supervisor via a secure communication channel and documenting the temporary access. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between operational efficiency and the strict adherence to security protocols designed to prevent unauthorized access and potential breaches. Need to maintain a high level of security, as mandated by Prosegur's internal policies and potentially relevant industry regulations. Though specific regulations are not provided for this exam, the principle of robust security remains paramount. Clashes with the immediate demand for swift access to critical equipment. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing priorities without compromising either security or operational continuity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented process for granting temporary access, even under pressure. This involves verifying the identity of the requesting personnel and the legitimacy of their request through established channels, even if it introduces a slight delay. This aligns with the fundamental principles of security management, which emphasize accountability, auditability, and the prevention of unauthorized actions. By following a defined procedure, even in an urgent situation, the professional upholds the integrity of the security system and minimizes the risk of a security lapse. This approach ensures that any deviation from standard procedure is recorded and justified, providing a clear audit trail should an incident occur. An incorrect approach that bypasses verification and grants immediate access without proper authorization fails to uphold the security protocols. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it creates a vulnerability that could be exploited. It demonstrates a disregard for established procedures, potentially violating Prosegur's internal security policies and any overarching security standards. Such an action undermines the trust placed in security personnel to maintain a secure environment and could lead to disciplinary action, reputational damage, or even legal consequences if a breach occurs as a result. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying access indefinitely due to a minor procedural ambiguity, also fails professionally. While adherence to procedure is important, an overly rigid interpretation that paralyzes essential operations without a clear, immediate security risk is inefficient and counterproductive. This approach lacks the professional judgment to assess risk and apply flexibility where appropriate, potentially impacting business continuity and demonstrating a lack of problem-solving skills. It fails to balance security with operational needs effectively. A third incorrect approach, which involves improvising a new undocumented access method, is highly problematic. This creates an ad hoc security loophole that is not subject to review or control. It bypasses established security frameworks and introduces an unknown risk. This is a direct violation of best practices in security management, which emphasize standardized, tested, and documented procedures. It is ethically questionable as it deviates from established responsibilities and could lead to unforeseen security vulnerabilities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a rapid assessment of the urgency versus the security risk. If immediate access is critical for operational continuity and the risk of unauthorized access is assessed as low e.g., the requesting personnel are known and trusted, and the request is for a specific limited purpose, a streamlined but still documented verification process should be employed. This might involve a verbal confirmation from a supervisor, followed by a written record. If the urgency is less critical, or the risk of unauthorized access is higher, then the full standard procedure must be followed. The key is to maintain a balance between security and operational needs, always prioritizing accountability and auditability. Question 16. The review process indicates that a security guard, during a routine shift, was approached by an individual claiming to be a representative of a Prosegur client. This individual requested access to specific client operational data that the guard has the technical ability to retrieve from a secured system. The guard is unsure if this individual is authorized to receive this information. Which of the following actions should the security guard take to ensure regulatory compliance and adherence to Prosegur's internal policies? Option A. Escalate the request to their direct supervisor or the designated data protection officer for verification and authorization before taking any action. Option B. Immediately provide the requested client operational data to the individual, assuming they have a legitimate reason for the request. Option C. Politely refuse to provide any information and inform the individual that such requests must be made through official channels. Option D. Attempt to verify the individual's identity and authorization through a quick online search before providing the data. The correct answer is C. Politely refuse to provide any information and inform the individual that such requests must be made through official channels. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential lapse in adhering to Prosegur's internal policies regarding the handling of sensitive client information, specifically concerning data protection and confidentiality. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of both regulatory obligations and internal company procedures. The security guard is in a position of trust, and any breach, even if unintentional, can have significant repercussions for the client, Prosegur, and the individual. Careful judgment is required to balance the immediate need for information with the long-term implications of data mishandling. The correct approach, which involves escalating the request to the designated supervisor or data protection officer, represents best professional practice because It aligns with Prosegur's established data handling protocols and regulatory requirements for data privacy. This ensures that any access to sensitive client information is logged, authorized, and conducted in a manner that minimizes risk. It upholds the principle of least privilege and adheres to the spirit of data protection laws, which mandate that personal data is processed lawfully, fairly, and transparently, and only for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes. An incorrect approach, such as directly providing the requested information without verification, represents a failure to comply with Prosegur's internal data security policies. This could lead to unauthorized disclosure of sensitive client data, violating confidentiality agreements and potentially contravening data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the request entirely, fails to acknowledge the need for a structured and authorized process for information access, potentially hindering legitimate operational needs while still not safeguarding data appropriately. A third incorrect approach, like attempting to access the information through unauthorized means, is a clear breach of security protocols and ethical conduct, exposing both the individual and Prosegur to severe legal and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and regulations. This involves 1. Identifying the nature of the request and the sensitivity of the information involved. 2. Consulting internal policies and procedures for guidance on handling such requests. 3. If unsure or if the request falls outside standard operating procedures, escalating the matter to the appropriate authority, e.g., supervisor, compliance officer. 4. Documenting all actions taken and communications related to the request. This systematic approach ensures accountability, minimizes risk, and maintains the integrity of client data and company operations. Question 17. The analysis reveals that during a routine security patrol at client facility, a Prosegur officer notices a non-employee attempting to access a restricted area using what appears to be a duplicated access card. There is no immediate indication of aggression or intent to cause harm, but the access attempt is clearly unauthorized and deviates from standard security protocols. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer? Option A. Ignore the incident as it does not appear to be an immediate threat and the individual has not yet gained entry. Option B. Immediately confront the individual and attempt to detain them, citing unauthorized access. Option C. Approach the individual and politely ask them to leave the restricted area without further escalation. Option D. Discreetly observe the individual's actions from a safe distance and report the incident to the security supervisor via radio, awaiting further instructions. The correct answer is B. Immediately confront the individual and attempt to detain them, citing unauthorized access. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a security officer, while conducting a routine patrol, observes a situation that deviates from standard operating procedures, but does not immediately present a clear and present danger. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate intervention with the requirement to follow established protocols and avoid escalating a situation unnecessarily or acting outside of authorized parameters. Careful judgment is required to assess the level of risk, the appropriate response, and the potential consequences of each action. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established protocols and the chain of command. By reporting the observation through the designated channels and awaiting further instruction, the officer ensures that the situation is handled by individuals with the appropriate authority and training. This aligns with Prosegur's commitment to operational integrity and risk management, minimizing the potential for unauthorized actions that could compromise security, lead to liability, or violate company policy. This approach upholds the principle of accountability and ensures that all actions are documented and justifiable. An incorrect approach of directly intervening without authorization or clear directive would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for established procedures, potentially leading to an escalation of the situation, injury to oneself or others, or legal repercussions for Prosegur. Such an action could be construed as exceeding the officer's authority and could result in disciplinary action, including termination. Another incorrect approach of ignoring the observation entirely would be a failure of duty of care and a breach of professional responsibility. It could allow a potentially developing security risk to go unaddressed, leading to a breach of client trust and potential harm. This also violates the ethical obligation to report suspicious or unusual activity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough assessment of the immediate environment and the observed deviation. This assessment should consider the potential risks, the severity of the deviation from standard operating procedures, and the potential impact on client security. The next step is to consult established protocols and guidelines. If the situation is not an immediate emergency, the protocol will likely dictate reporting the observation to a supervisor or designated point of contact. This ensures that the response is coordinated, authorized, and within the scope of the officer's duties and Prosegur's operational framework. Documenting the observation and the subsequent actions taken is crucial for accountability and future reference. Question 18. Risk assessment procedures indicate that upcoming operational restructuring at Prosegur may cause significant concern among its diverse stakeholder groups. Which of the following communication strategies best addresses these concerns while adhering to regulatory and ethical standards? Option A. Develop tailored communication plans for each stakeholder group, providing specific, factual updates on the restructuring's impact mitigation strategies, and Prosegur's continued commitment to service excellence and strategic objectives. Option B. Issue a single, general announcement to all stakeholders, focusing only on the positive aspects of the restructuring and avoiding any mention of potential challenges or disruptions. Option C. Withhold detailed information from employees regarding the restructuring to prevent internal anxiety and maintain morale during the transition period. Option D. Prioritize communication with investors only, as they represent the primary financial interest in Prosegur, and address other stakeholder concerns only if specifically requested. The correct answer is A. Develop tailored communication plans for each stakeholder group, providing specific, factual updates on the restructuring's impact, mitigation strategies, and Prosegur's continued commitment to service excellence and strategic objectives. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing stakeholder expectations during a period of significant operational change within Prosegur. The challenge lies in balancing the need for transparency with the potential for market sensitivity and the diverse interests of various stakeholder groups. Prosegur, as a security services provider, operates in a highly regulated environment where trust and reliability are paramount. Any perceived instability or lack of clear communication can negatively impact its reputation, client relationships, and investor confidence. The differing priorities of employees' job security, clients' service continuity, and investors' financial performance require a nuanced communication strategy. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactive, tailored communication that addresses the specific concerns of each stakeholder group, while maintaining a consistent overall message about Prosegur's strategic direction and commitment to operational excellence. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for corporate governance and investor relations. Specifically, it reflects principles of transparency, fairness, and timely disclosure, which are often embedded in financial market regulations, e.g., UK Financial Conduct Authority's disclosure guidance and transparency rules, and corporate governance codes. By providing clear, factual updates and outlining mitigation strategies for potential disruptions, Prosegur demonstrates responsible management and fosters continued trust, thereby safeguarding its long-term viability and reputation. This approach also supports ethical obligations to inform those who have a vested interest in the company's performance and stability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to withhold information from employees due to concerns about internal morale. This failure would violate ethical obligations to employees and could lead to rumors, decreased productivity, and potential industrial relations issues. It also neglects the regulatory expectation for fair treatment of all employees, especially during significant organizational shifts. Another incorrect approach would be to provide generic, non-specific updates to all stakeholders without tailoring the message. This would fail to address the unique concerns of each group, potentially leading to misunderstandings, increased anxiety, and a perception of dismissiveness. For example, investors require financial projections and strategic rationale, while clients need assurances about service delivery. A one-size-fits-all approach is unlikely to satisfy these distinct needs and could be seen as a failure in due diligence and stakeholder management, potentially attracting regulatory scrutiny for inadequate disclosure. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on positive aspects and downplay potential challenges. This lack of transparency can be interpreted as misleading or deceptive, especially if negative impacts materialize. It undermines trust and can lead to severe reputational damage and potential legal repercussions if it is deemed that material information was omitted or misrepresented, violating principles of honest communication and potentially breaching disclosure requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a stakeholder-centric communication framework. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholder groups, understanding their specific interests and concerns, and developing tailored communication plans. The process should prioritize accuracy, timeliness, and transparency, ensuring that all communications are consistent with regulatory requirements and ethical standards. A robust risk assessment should inform the communication strategy, anticipating potential negative reactions and developing proactive mitigation plans. Regular review and adaptation of the communication strategy based on stakeholder feedback and evolving circumstances are crucial for effective stakeholder management. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current client reporting process is time-consuming for operational staff, potentially impacting their availability for core security duties. However, there are concerns that streamlining this process might lead to a reduction in the detail or accuracy of the reports, which are critical for client satisfaction and regulatory compliance. What is the most appropriate initial step to address this feedback? Option A. Immediately implement a new, simplified reporting template to reduce the time spent by operational staff, assuming that the core information will still be captured. Option B. Conduct a detailed analysis of the current reporting process, mapping each step, identifying bottlenecks, and assessing the impact of potential changes on report accuracy and compliance requirements before proposing any modifications. Option C. Advise stakeholders that the current reporting process is a necessary operational requirement and that efficiency gains are not possible without compromising essential service delivery. Option D. Delegate the task of reviewing the reporting process to a junior team member with the instruction to find the quickest way to reduce the time spent on reports. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed analysis of the current reporting process, mapping each step, identifying bottlenecks, and assessing the impact of potential changes on report accuracy and compliance requirements before proposing any modifications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization where efficiency gains might inadvertently impact service quality or compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing the drive for operational improvement with the paramount importance of maintaining high service standards and adhering to Prosegur's stringent operational guidelines and any relevant regulatory frameworks governing security services. Careful judgment is required to ensure that proposed changes do not compromise the core mission of providing secure and reliable services. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the feedback, a thorough analysis of the current process, and the development of solutions that demonstrably improve efficiency without negatively affecting service delivery or compliance. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing data-driven decision-making, stakeholder engagement, and a risk-based approach to change management. It ensures that any optimization is aligned with Prosegur's commitment to quality and regulatory adherence, which are fundamental to its reputation and operational integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately implement changes based solely on the feedback without a comprehensive analysis. This fails to consider potential unintended consequences, such as reduced service quality or increased risk, and bypasses the necessary due diligence required by professional standards and potentially regulatory oversight. It demonstrates a lack of systematic problem-solving and a disregard for the impact on all stakeholders. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback as minor or anecdotal without proper investigation. This shows a failure to engage with stakeholders and a lack of commitment to continuous improvement. It can lead to missed opportunities for optimization and can erode trust with those providing the feedback, potentially leading to more significant issues down the line. Ethically, it represents a neglect of duty to address concerns that could impact service delivery. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on cost reduction through process changes without considering the impact on service quality or compliance. While cost efficiency is important, it cannot come at the expense of core operational requirements and regulatory obligations. This approach demonstrates a narrow focus that could lead to breaches of service-level agreements or regulatory noncompliance, which are critical failures in the security industry. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to process optimization. This involves 1. Actively listening to and documenting all stakeholder feedback. 2. Conducting a thorough root cause analysis of any identified issues. 3. Evaluating the current process against established performance metrics and regulatory requirements. 4. Developing and piloting potential solutions, assessing their impact on efficiency, service quality, and compliance. 5. Implementing approved changes with clear communication and monitoring mechanisms. This systematic process ensures that optimizations are effective, sustainable, and aligned with organizational goals and ethical responsibilities. Question 20. During the evaluation of a potential security incident involving unauthorized access to a client's secure facility, a Prosegur security supervisor suspects that a specific client's data logs might contain evidence of the breach. The supervisor is aware that accessing these logs requires specific authorization and adherence to strict data privacy protocols. The supervisor is considering how to proceed to investigate this suspicion effectively and ethically. Option A. Report the suspicion to the immediate supervisor and request formal authorization to access the relevant client data logs, outlining the specific reasons for the request and the scope of the intended review. Option B. Discuss the suspicion and the need for data access with colleagues in other departments who might have encountered similar issues. To gather informal advice on how to proceed. Option C. Initiate an immediate, unauthorized review of the client's data logs to identify any anomalies related to the suspected breach, justifying the action as necessary to protect the client's interests. Option D. Delay any investigation into the client's data logs until a formal complaint is received from the client, to avoid any perception of overreach or unauthorized access. Correct answer is C. Initiate an immediate, unauthorized review of the client's data logs to identify any anomalies related to the suspected breach, justifying the action as necessary to protect the client's interests. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the handling of sensitive client information within a security services context, specifically Prosegur's operational environment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate need for information to address a potential security breach with the absolute imperative to protect client confidentiality and comply with data protection regulations. Misjudging this balance can lead to severe legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a breach of trust with clients. The professional must exercise sound judgment, adhering strictly to established protocols and legal frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to the Prosegur's internal data handling policies and relevant data protection legislation, assuming a UK/CISI jurisdiction for this exam. This would align with the Data Protection Act 2018 and GDPR principles. This involves a structured, authorized process for accessing and reviewing client data only when strictly necessary and with appropriate oversight. It ensures that any data accessed is handled securely, logged, and used solely for the purpose of investigating the suspected breach. This method upholds client confidentiality, demonstrates due diligence, and maintains compliance with legal and ethical obligations, representing best professional practice by minimizing risk and safeguarding trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately accessing all available client data without a clear, documented justification or authorization. This constitutes a significant breach of data privacy principles and likely violates data protection laws by exceeding the scope of necessary processing and potentially exposing sensitive information without a legitimate basis. It demonstrates a lack of respect for client confidentiality and a failure to follow established security and data handling protocols. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the potential breach due to concerns about data privacy, thereby delaying or failing to investigate. This is professionally negligent and ethically unsound. While data privacy is paramount, failing to address a credible security threat can lead to greater harm, including potential data loss or misuse by unauthorized parties, and a failure to meet contractual obligations with clients to maintain their security. This approach prioritizes one aspect of responsibility over another, leading to a compromised security posture. A third incorrect approach involves sharing the suspicion of a breach and the need for data access with unauthorized personnel or external parties before a formal investigation is initiated. This is a severe breach of confidentiality and could lead to the dissemination of unverified information, causing undue alarm, reputational damage to the client, and potentially tipping off malicious actors. It bypasses established reporting lines and security clearances, creating significant risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a risk-based, protocol-driven decision-making process. When faced with a potential security incident, the first step is to assess the credibility and severity of the threat. This assessment should then inform the activation of predefined incident response procedures. These procedures will typically involve authorized personnel, clear lines of communication, and strict guidelines for data access and handling. The professional should always ask, what is the minimum necessary action to address this threat while adhering to all legal and ethical obligations? Documentation and oversight are critical at every stage to ensure accountability and compliance.